Blog Talk Radio. Welcome to MindShifters Radio with your co-host, the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce, and his wife, Jeanie. Michael and Jeanie share with you the wisdom of the ancient Aramaic internal process of forgiveness. They offer tools and support 5 days a week from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. They will support you in building a solid foundation within yourself to live in pure love. In Aramaic, Rakh-ma. Michael is the author of Why Is This Happening to Me Again? For more information on Michael and Jeanie, please visit www.whyagain.com. And now your co-host, the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael and Jeanie Ryce. And the truth that is rooted within me.
Hi, and welcome to MindShifters Radio with the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce. And we are on day, I think it's 72, on Memorial Day. And we're here at the Institute at Heartland. And welcome, Michael.
Hi, sweetie. Welcome, everybody, to MindShifters Radio. Day 72, was that, Jeanie?
It is day 72.
72. So for 72 days, we've been inviting everyone to consider looking at and being responsible for one tiny, even the tiniest issue or situation in your life where you have some form of hostility or fear, which I posit is the cause of all war. And my hostility and fear is the cause of war. No, mine's a contributor, yours is a contributor. And when we choose to be responsible, we can change that whole game on planet Earth. So that's what we're here to do, and to honor those who have been forced into the insanity of war and have brought that insanity home with them to impact and infect the people around them. So we're here to support the shift and the change in that process, and we invite you to be part of that. And beyond that, we're here to learn and to teach the Aramaic understanding of the word forgiveness, which is the exact opposite. When we ask you to forgive, we're not asking you to let somebody else off the hook because you have some form of hostility or fear, but rather in Aramaic, forgiveness is the tool with which you change what's happening in your mind. It's the tool with which you remove what never belonged in a human life. And guess what never belonged? Any form of hostility or fear. This never belonged in you, never belonged in me. And so that's what we're here to change. That's what we're here to get rid of, is that hostility and fear. And if you're not familiar with the conversation we're having about forgiveness, we invite you to go to our website, www.whyagain.com. And on our website, you will find the how-to of forgiveness from the Aramaic. So please join us in that project, and we're delighted that you're here. We're here to support you in the tool and learning, the tool of forgiveness, how to change what goes on in your mind. And we welcome you to the show. Thanks for being with us. Jeanie, do we have any callers in the chat room? Questions?
We have several people out there. Peacemakers with us today, and they had asked a question the other day, so perhaps we can address that. We're glad you're back with us. We missed you for a few days.
We've missed you, Peacemaker. Welcome back. And you had written a note to Jeanie about some of the research you've been doing on feelings and the mind and such, and came up with the conclusion that there are two minds, and I'm in absolute agreement with you on that. If you take a look at the worksheet, the Re-ality Management Worksheet, you'll find that what it speaks about is those two minds. And so right in harmony with what you were saying. And if you look at the, let's key. Step one, if you go to the download worksheet section on the worksheet, you'll find the latest copy of the Re-ality Management Worksheet. And you'll see that it speaks about, in step 5, in order to collapse my replicant mind's reality. If you look down at the bottom, the definition of the replicant mind is a function of brain cells replaying corrupt images from generational content. The root of all whys is happening to me again, and disease experiences. So the structure, this storage system, has a function, and it functions through resonance, and all it can do is show you or resonate whatever's in it. So, and I like to use an example of, let's imagine that I take a middle C tuning fork, I hit it on a disc, I put it in front of a second middle C tuning fork. What happens to the second tuning fork? Without being touched, it starts to vibrate. Now, if I say to you, don't think about the color of your car, what happens? Well, most people say, well, now I'm thinking about the color of my car. And I'd offer, no, you're not thinking about the color of your car. What's happening is brain cells are firing. The replicant mind is replicating whatever content it has. It's playing that out. And we call that the mind, but it really isn't the mind at all. And so in the same sense, when the second tuning fork starts to vibrate, is it thinking? If brain cells vibrate in response to a stimulus, don't think about the color of your car, what's the front door of your house look like? Obviously, there's no thinking there. It's just the resonating, the firing of whatever content is there. And so in step 5 in the worksheet, we offer that whenever you're in what we call the replicant mind, and there's any kind of hostility or fear, what's happening is that you're getting stuck in a hallucination, something that isn't true about what's going on in the actual world. So step 5 says, in order to collapse my replicant mind's reality, be liberated from my hostility and fear, and get back to my true mind. The true mind is the mind of being. It is where actual thinking takes place. The non-being mind, or the replicant mind, has a cheap copy of everything that's real in the spiritual dimension where the true mind exists. And the copy of the true mind's function is this resonance device. It just fires whatever content is there and, of course, plays out the same stuff. But when we wake up and awaken to the true mind, then real thinking is the ability to keep love conscious, active, and present. And something less than love comes up in us, which begins the dissolution of that which is less than love. It's a very important part of the healing and of the forgiveness process. So I'm in agreement with you on those two, and there are 3 levels of awareness that we can have of what's in or I should say 3 different levels of amplitude for the functioning of this replicant mind. What's conscious at any given moment is what's firing in brain cells at an abnormal or above normal level, so you're aware of it. So if I say don't think about the color of your car, a moment ago you weren't aware of that content, and now you become aware of it, and then I say, what's your favorite item of clothing look like? And all of a sudden you go, oh, yeah, that shirt, I love it. That's my favorite. Yep, okay. And then I say, what's the front door of your house look like? And notice that you're not, quote, unquote, thinking about the color of your car. Those brain cells recede back to the subconscious level. So we see conscious and subconscious changing places all the time. And then when somebody holds their breath, they create a veil. They create a barrier, which is the veil between the subconscious and the unconscious. And that's what inhibits us from being able to access that dissociated mind and its content. And it's the dissociated mind and its content that, when it's fired into activity, tends to run our lives. So that's the whole idea of the Re-ality Management forgiveness process, is to remove from the replicant mind that which never belonged. And, of course, if it's in a dissociated state, you can't remove it, you can't change it, because you're dissociated from it. It's not yours. There's no access. What the forgiveness process does, it allows us to go into that place where we've dissociated from pain, from trauma, from terror, from hatred, from vengeance, from sadness, from grief, and all the thoughts and realities that go with it. And, of course, because those things tend to be highly charged energies, they become the things that attract us into circumstances and pull out of people certain behaviors. You know, if you think about the times when you've walked into somebody's space totally committed to being loving, nurturing, and caring, and all of a sudden found yourself functioning like a mad banshee, what happened was you walked into that person's energy field, and their field resonated your mad banshee, and your mad banshee takes over. Oftentimes, of course, when it happens to us, it happens against our own will and choice. And we can sit around and reason about and think about and try to figure out and try to change the replicant mind for eternity, and guess what? It will never change with any of those tools. The only tool that will change it is called forgiveness. You've got to collapse the projections from that replicant mind and come back into direct relationship with what's there, and that's precisely what forgiveness does. It collapses, it cracks the dissociated mind, puts you back in a direct relationship. Now, it's not always fun. It can be pretty heavy duty to go back into relationship with those dissociated things, because that's why we dissociated from the first place. They were heavy duty. Did not handle them. They were painful. Ouch, this hurts. I don't want to deal with this. So we've got a tool to share with you. Again, go to the homepage of Why Is This Happening to Me? And actually on any page in the text you can access the forgiveness process, or any page on the site. On the right-hand side, you'll see a link that says Download Worksheets. The first, second, and third links are all about the forgiveness process. The first one is the new chapter 24 from my book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? Second link is the Re-ality Management Worksheet, and the latest one. And the third link is a recording of I believe it was last Tuesday's show, where we walked a young lady through, a very courageous young lady and a very willing young lady, through the process of forgiveness from the Aramaic. And it was awesome. So you can download that and listen to step-by-step guidance through the worksheet process by accessing that particular show. Free MP3 download. Yes, dear.
Okay, so the learning and all the input is appreciated. One sudden question. Are there similarities with the replicant mind and the intelligent mind, or is that next, later?
Can you say that again, sweetie? You're fading a little bit.
Oh, okay. He says, thank you, always in a state of learning, and all input is appreciated. One sudden question. What are the similarities with the replicant mind and the intelligent mind? Or is that something you're going to talk about?
None. Yeah, there are no similarities. My input would be that there are no similarities. The replicant mind, whatever's in it, just plays out, plays out, plays out. There are no choices in it. It's simply a resonance device. It's like a computer. It can't think. It looks like it thinks. So you do a calculation on your computer, but if you program your computer that 2 plus 2 equals 5, 1,000% of the time that you ask your computer what 2 plus 2 equals, it'll say 5. You can't figure it out, can't think, can't fix it, can't correct it. The replicant mind, once you've structured it with something, situations like this are dangerous, it can't change itself. It's been called the monkey body, the monkey mind. It just plays out whatever's going on in it. And until we can access the hidden parts of it that hold the deepest traumas that we haven't wanted to deal with, they're the things that are going to tend to run our lives. And it is the spiritual faculty of choice, which comes from the true mind, the mind of being, that holds the intelligence to be able to change that content. That would be my input on that one.
Okay, Mike. I know your email is not working well, so I just got this from Dr. Tim, who, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Just got this email from Dr. Tim, and it says that you are confirmed to do the workshop the week of August 21st through the 27th. So you might want to talk about that at Reverend. And am I saying that right? the Church of Religious Science?
Yes. Yep, that's where we'll be.
So that's awesome. That's confirmed?
And I'm not sure if they call it religious science or if it's CSL, but that's where we'll be in Chicago. And we'll be doing 6 workshops. We'll start out on Sunday afternoon with Why Is This Happening to Me Again? Monday we'll be on Creating Consciously. Tuesday evening, 7 to 9:30, we'll be Healing Through Relationships. Wednesday evening, 7 to 9:30, The Circle of Life and How to Play. If you're in Chicago, come and play. These will all be free open workshops. Thursday, 7 to 9:30, Codependence to Interdependence. Friday, Naturopathic Keys to Health. And we'll probably do a Saturday, Mind Shifters and Still Point Breathing. It is the one workshop that we actually charge a fee for. And it'll be an all-day process-oriented workshop, but we'll be getting flyers together and get those up on the website as soon as possible, probably within the next 24 hours. And so that's what's happening in Chicago, and we'll be probably there, maybe there for another week as well. I'm not sure. Dr. Tim is working on a couple of other things. Is Tim on the show today, sweetie?
He is.
Oh, good. Hi, Tim. How are you, sir?
I'm doing quite well, thank you.
Awesome.
And delighted to know we have a spot for you for that first week in the 21st through the 27th, and I'm waiting for responses from others in different areas of the Chicagoland community to see if we can get you booked for another week.
Oh, that would be fabulous. Awesome. Hi, any thoughts on the two-mind idea and the 3 levels of functioning of the replicant mind?
Well, just that at every level, as I continue to do this work, I get a little bit more access to situations where I get to see how my mind has been dissociated. And it's only an after-the-fact situation. The more I work at it, the less time it takes for me to catch the fact that I was dissociated, and my goal would be to dissociate less and less. But it's absolutely fascinating to see examples in my own life of where I thought I saw things very clearly, I thought I heard things very clearly, and then to have it proved to me that I'm the only one in the room who heard it that way or saw it that way. And it's just fascinating.
Right.
Absolutely fascinating.
Like, bummer, eh?
Yeah, well, it's a bummer that it happened, but it's just a delight to be able to see it because now that I can see it, there's something I can do with it.
Yeah. And of course, it takes the willingness to see differently when we hold a reality. A lot of people like, I'm sticking to my story, I'm in my rage, and this reality is about you, and that's the way it is. And the truth is that anytime we're in any form of hostility or fear, they're the markers, in the replicant mind that tell us that our perception, the picture that our mind is showing us, is mistaken, that it's an error. That's the way that you know that your mind is using corrupt data and that you're living in hallucination. It's telling you a lie. And it's just time for us to get out of the lies that our minds have been structured with and get back to who we really are as human beings and functioning as human beings.
Well, and many different philosophies and schools understand the difficulty we have as human beings in admitting we're wrong. And that was one of the quotes from DeMello yesterday, that the most difficult things for human beings aren't intellectual pursuits and feats of physical strength. One of the most difficult is admitting we're wrong.
Oh, yes. Yep. And of course, why would that be? Pretty obvious that if we have a lot of pain that's been inflicted on us. You know, we have people who rejected us when we were wrong. We have people who accused us of being wrong or doing wrong when we weren't. You know, I didn't do a thing, but they accused me anyway. And you know, the result of that was some form of emotional, mental, physical battering. Then obviously one becomes pretty attached to being right, because the thing that follows in the replicant mind, acknowledging that you've made an error means you're going to get a beating. In the being mind, it means that you get to heal. But it's a tough transition to move into being and out of the associations with pain and trauma for being wrong or not being perfect or not being right or what have you. But to acknowledge it. We had an awesome example in our intensive yesterday. We had a young lady that had a conflict going on and was just ready to, you know, fly off the handle all the way, screaming, you know, kind of flying into raging. And when we finally got her to be able to back off from her own mind and observe it, realized that it was something that didn't have anything to do with the situation at all, but had come from times when she'd done the very thing she was accusing someone else of. And when she was able to entertain that idea rather than project it onto the person who, you know, that she was thinking it was about, or rather than, you know, I got to play John the Baptist. Unfortunately, she was very gentle and kind with me because she easily, as I asked her to be responsible and to look on a deeper level, she easily could have turned to take my head off, which, of course, I've had happen a time or two before. It's called playing John the Baptist. But she very gingerly walked into the space where she could look at, wow, this pain's been with me all my life. It hasn't got to do with this situation. It's what I'm projecting into this situation. And she was able to stop, just right cold, stop right in the middle of it, do a forgiveness process. And all of a sudden she says, I've got all this energy running in my legs and in my arms. And it was just miraculous to watch the transformation take place, because all of a sudden she broke out in a smile. I mean, literally, 45 seconds earlier, she was screaming, raging. And all of a sudden, she breaks out in a smile and says, oh, I just have this joy in me. Like, yeah, that's what human life is about. It's about the presence of that aliveness and joy. But if our replicant mind has in it some sort of trauma around a particular situation, then you're going to experience that trauma. And the thing to get is that all trauma is absolutely optional. It comes from this generational, multi-generational database we call a body replicant mind unit, and it's going to go on playing out whatever's in it until you decide to take responsibility and reach in and change it. And, of course, when it does, it'll always have somebody else to blame. And the way that you enter into blame, the way that you enter into denial, you can go back as far as 2,000 years ago, and they were saying, stop your denial. But the way we enter into denial is to say, you made me. When I want to make you responsible for the output of my mind, I'm in total codependence. And we did several shows back a few weeks ago on codependence. If you want to look in the archives, and you might find those interesting to go through and give a listen to, folks. We'd be delighted to have you do that. The archives are at www.whyagain.com, and right at the top there's a link to the radio show in the archives. As well as you can download the book free in English, German, Russian, Spanish, Farsi. Jeanie has put months of work on the website. I mean, you can go in there and do months of work with what's there to really come to the point of capturing and comprehending everything that's there. And if you have a question or a thought for us, we'd be delighted if you would call in. Our call-in number is 646-200-4169. We'd love to hear from you.
Michael, I found that quote from DeMello.
Oh, cool.
He said, someone once said, quote, the three most difficult things for a human being are not physical feats or intellectual achievements. They are, first, returning love for hate. Second, including the excluded, and third, admitting that you are wrong. And that reminds me of one of the things you talk about in a couple of your lectures. If I decide to withhold love from anyone, I must first withhold it from myself. And the healing comes from extending love to people, especially those that I have some reason to believe don't deserve my love. Because that's all smoke and mirrors. And what I'm actually saying at some level is, I don't deserve the love.
Well, and I'm saying, I don't live as love. You know, we think of love as a verb in this culture. That's what we've been taught. And most everybody's out there looking for love in all the wrong places, as that song title went back a few years ago, a few decades ago now. And when you talk about returning love for hate, what a refinement on that would be is you can't return love for hate, because love isn't a verb. It's not something you return. It's not something you do. But you can stand in the space of your human life as love in the presence of someone's hatred. And what will happen is that presence of love will tend to transmute the hatred, the anger, the fear, the garbage that goes on in our non-human world. And a non-human world is a world where the active presence of love is not expressing. So to be the space of love for everything means that you've claimed and chosen to live a human life rather than a life of hostility and fear. Makes for a whole different process. Life becomes a different game.
Yep, in many ways.
Oh, go ahead, Tim.
I was saying yes, in many ways, and in ways that I can't understand until I go there myself.
Yeah, until I do the work. You know, there are lots of people who believe in certain people who taught the work, but will not put their own hand to the plow, will not do the work. In fact, 2,000 years ago, that was exactly Yeshua's statement to those around him. He said, you've come up with all this, you force these people to do this, but you won't put one finger to it. And so it becomes a belief system, and a belief system doesn't lead to an experience. Studying words intellectually, having all this understanding, doesn't lead to the direct experience of a human life. It is the collapsing of the systemic fault. You remember we read the quotes from Bohr, physicist, and what he talks about is that there is a systemic error or fault in the human mind, in the thought systems of humanity. And it's time for us to be restored to who we are and function as human beings. Jeanie, any questions or thoughts in the chat room or all things?
Peacemaker just says, I notice that we tend to degrade our minds and we see them as corrupt. He doesn't see anything as ever corrupt, that there is always an intertwined intent, that it's being aware and being in charge that's the key. The only limitations are our own, and that love is always there.
Well, underlying everything, the love, I would agree, is always present, but is it in charge or expressing? I don't know. The last time somebody went and shot up a school system, a bunch of kids in a school and teachers, I don't think there was much love active or present. And the idea is to get out of the corrupt data mind. There is a replicant mind, storage system in the body, which has a marker that tells you when the data your mind is building your reality with is corrupt. And it's called hostility and fear. When hostility or fear is present, my offering is that obliterates human life. That is, it wipes human life out of expression and tends to just play out the same games that it's been playing for thousands of years on planet Earth. The healing process is that of being able to directly bring forward what underlies that corrupt data that has our minds our body's mind, the replicant mind, just playing out its past realities rather than showing us the truth and giving the opportunity to change that. And so that's the idea of the forgiveness process. And I'd invite you to maybe pick up that forgiveness worksheet and actually start putting the pen to the paper, or continue putting the pen to the paper, and watch how the corrupt database changes. And what happens is it moves from the lie of hostility and fear to the truth of our being, the active presence of love. As I shared with you about that young lady that was yesterday in the intensive, went from screaming, raging, totally corrupt data, totally projection, totally false about the person she was looking at, and shifted, like in a matter of a minute and a half or 2 minutes, to a tingling sensation in her form and a smile on her face and the delightful presence of love. That's what forgiveness does, and that's what we're here to support happening in the world, getting rid of the systemic fault, as David Bohm calls it, and bringing correction. Interesting thing that Bohm says, and if you're not familiar with David Bohm, if it weren't for McCarthyism, where he got tagged by McCarthy back in the 50s, he would probably be mentioned more often than Einstein. That was the level he worked at. He's considered one of the preeminent quantum physicists of all time. He was a giant in the field of theoretical physics, philosophy, neuropsychology. He was part of the Manhattan Project. He collaborated with Carl Pribram at Stanford University and helped Pribram develop the model of the holonomic brain, and the process that he offers, or the input that he offers, is that there is a systemic fault within this carbon-based memory system. Of course, he doesn't call it a carbon-based memory system, but he says this. He says the system has a fault in it, a systemic fault. It is not a fault here or there, but a fault that is all throughout the system. It is everywhere and nowhere. That system not only includes thoughts and feelings, but includes the state of the body and includes the whole of society. You may say, I see a problem here, so I will bring my thought to bear on this problem. But my thought is a part of that system. It has the same fault as the fault I'm trying to look at, or a similar fault. Thought is constantly creating problems that way and then trying to solve them. But as it tries to solve them, it makes it worse because it doesn't notice that it's creating them. The more it thinks, the more problems it creates. Now, I'd offer that what he's talking about there is what we're identifying as the replicant mind, the storage system that if there's hostility and fear in it, has faults built into it. And if we buy the things that the hostile, fearful mind tells us, if we do the behaviors the hostile, fearful mind guides us to do, then we're trapped in this systemic fault and we create an insane world. The option to that is to use forgiveness, to collapse those systemic faults, get back to an actual mind that thinks rather than a replicant mind that just plays out or replicates what's gone on in the past. And so that's the direction we're heading in with the process of forgiveness, and we're delighted that you're here to do it with us. And, of course, it amazes me that, yes, please.
We have Lynn on the line.
Hi, young lady.
Good day. How are you?
Welcome. I am blessed and highly favored. How about you?
Feeling much the same, thank you.
Cool. Awesome.
I've been trying to do some worksheets around this whole issue that you and Tim were talking about when just a little bit ago, and the need to be right and the difficulty to admit you're wrong. And, I went through medical school, and I feel like I've been detoxing ever since because, you had to know everything. Yeah, you had to know everything, and and do everything for the first time as if you had done it 100 times before, So I found medical school incredibly traumatic. So I'm preparing a webinar series, which is really a culmination of the work I've been doing for the last 20 years. and it's making me very anxious, and I've done quite a few worksheets around the webinar.
Can I interrupt you there? Can I interrupt you
Yep.
for a second?
Yep.
Notice that you're putting the power outside of you to create this anxiety. I'd offer that as long as you language and words are real key to how this thing operates, called the replicant mind. If I say this webinar series is creating a lot of anxiety, I just projected the power to create anxiety in me onto the webinar series. The truth is, the webinar series is whatever it is, it can't create anything in you. However, the doing of it can show you the anxiety you have about doing things, and then you could forgive that anxiety and be free of anxiety while you're putting your webinar series together. So that would be a perfect place for the forgiveness process.
Okay, so could I ask your help on a particular worksheet I was doing around this anxiety issue? I put me in 1A, and then in 1B was what happened. I was reading a particular journal, and that I have piled up that I've let go, I haven't kept up with, and there's so much stuff I haven't kept up with or I'm not ahead of. That was my experience reading this journal. And then C is I'm scared, I'm anxious, and the thought behind it is if I don't know everything there is to know and put it all together in a unique and practical way, I'm no good. I'm no good.
Mm. So it sounds like they're right back to standing in front of Dad, telling you the quality of being that you are.
Oh, okay.
Does that resonate?
Yeah, it's all that. I mean, the whole medical school, the medical board, it's all one. Yeah. Yeah.
I remember when I worked with the dean of the medical school in a school in Florida, and I made the suggestion to him, what do you suppose it'd be like if medical school were a warm, loving environment where students were brought to be nurtured and loved and healed and sent out healers? And he just sat with his job and was like, what a radical thought. A year later, he quit as the dean of the medical school and went into bring alternative medicine into the medical schools.
Michael?
So, yes, sir.
I have a story I have to share here for you and Lynn. When I was in graduate school, I had a professor who was, he and some other students were commissioned to do a study to figure out why medical doctors were such, quote, jerks, unquote. And so they went back and did these psychological autopsies that went back to kindergarten, grade school, high school, college, and they took a large enough sample to have very good statistical representation. And what they found was that the people who wanted to become doctors after college were relatively healthy, balanced people, and that it wasn't something in grade school or high school or college that warped them or that only warped people were going into the medical profession. It was that in medical school they got warped. Mm-hmm. And that study was then handed over to the people who commissioned it at University of Chicago and at Northwestern, and it was burned.
I know what happened to it.
It was burned.
Yeah, get rid of it.
Wow.
Well, if you look
I'm not
at
surprised.
medical training,
I got that directly from an author of the study.
Yeah. If you look at medical training, it's classic brainwashing. I mean, you don't have time for bodily functions. You're under high pressure, failure. There's always a threat hanging over your head. There's always fear. I mean, they're all the things that are, and there's always the comparison game with every other student. That's the whole process, if you study brainwashing, of what happens. And that's where, as I spoke to this dean from the medical school, what if it was a warm, loving environment instead of this pressure cooker that is literally designed to instill ideas that this person will never question again. And many of the ideas are false. And if you look at who controls it, the root of the word pharmacy is sorcery. That's what controls that game to a great degree. Now, there's some awesome people in medicine, And there's some awesomely insane things that are done in medical practice. So it's, and here we are, just like us humans, we've all got our stuff. And so, Lynn, I'd offer that it sounds like your worksheet's going to be about letting go of these replicant mind beliefs that there's something inherently wrong with you, because it's a lie. But carrying that kind of pain would drive anybody to drink.
Yep.
Forgiving that kind of pain will remove that compulsion.
Well, I got stuck on 3. I don't know what 3 is.
What was the goal?
Yeah, I don't know when I'm doing a worksheet on myself, I don't know how to do number 3. It seems like...
Okay, so it sounds like the goal that you hold for yourself is just to be perfect, know everything, and please everybody. Would that kind of fit?
That really does sum it up. Covers all bases.
There you go. So I'd offer that 3 different worksheets. I'd put that in the goal on 3 different worksheets on self, and then go through the rest of the forgiveness process and start collapsing that goal.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens when we load a goal, the Harvard research we talked about that says that in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells fire, the max amount of data we get to see is 9 bits. So we're seeing just a tiny fragment. Something tells the mind which 9 bits it's supposed to use, and that something is our goals. And so if we load a goal, i.e. to be perfect, and in my dissociated mind, I'm judged, I'm not perfect, I'm going to get beat up, I'm going to get degraded, whatever, then what happens is when we load that goal to be perfect and we access that file on self, then all of a sudden all that corrupt data comes into play. And because when we experienced it initially, it was too painful, we didn't have the tools, we didn't know how to deal with it, there was denial and dissociation of that. And once we collapse the dissociation, the projection from it, crack the dissociation, then you can come back into direct relationship with those insane ideas about yourself. And dump the ideas that are obviously false. And one of the things I've found in my work is I don't know everything.
I had this experience when I was, pardon?
Go ahead.
I had this experience when I was doing a pediatric internship, sitting in a tiny conference room with a professor of infectious disease, and this was like 7 in the morning, and some of us had slept and some of us had not that night before, and he's just like up against the wall grilling us for literature references for this, for that, for the other thing, and I suddenly was able to like step out of it a little bit and look at him, and I'm going, what could drive him to be? He looked like he was, totally in military dress, except he had the white coat instead of, whatever jacket suit thing. And, he had the shine shoes that you could, see yourself in, and the cropped hair and shaved head, and he's just there, and and I'm going, the only thing that could drive him here is to act like this and to treat us like this is the fear of death. And it feels like that has, and really what you're talking about is, if you're in the fear-based mind, the ultimate fear would be death. And is it maybe true that, the whole belief system that's been created out of the teachings of Yeshua, it's based on we're not going to die. We're not going to die.
Well, and even more, I would say there's a step closer to that, because that fear that you're referring to that he lived in is actually the pain and the rage at the fact that he's already experienced death. That the being that he is, and again, to establish what the being is that we are, hold a newborn child.
Right.
the being that he was obliterated by his power person. And this is something we go into in our codependence work. Was totally and completely obliterated by his power person. He died. And most are dead by the age of 3 in this culture, by the age of 4.
Yep. And
that's the rage. That's the driver. And what happens is, at the point where that occurs, we give up in order to survive with our power person, that's somebody who has more power over our lives than we did, and they weren't functioning as love, which our birthright was to experience them functioning as love. In order to survive, because they had our very survival in their hands, we gave up the direct experience of love to buy into a self that was a total false set of ideas in the replicant mind. We bought that as an identity. And the rage at having had to give up the direct experience of life, of love, is the most awesomely painful and traumatic moment of anyone's life. And
say that again.
Over the years,
just say that.
I say the pain at having had to give up the direct experience of the active presence of love, our human lives, is so overwhelming, and the rage that's integrated into the false self at having to become, all of a sudden, instead of a human being, a human doing, is where that death occurs. And that becomes the driver for most everyone's life from that point on, until they're shown the tools and given the support and go into an environment where they can move back to the direct experience of their human lives, back to the direct experience of being, and get rid of the false idea of what their power person told them they were. And, you think back to some of the things that a power person tells their child, and it's so incredibly insane, so incredibly bizarre that you almost can't make it up. It's so far away from truth. And so to forgive and to get to the point where you touch back into that, you undo the whole false self, the whole false idea of self in the brain, and you go back to a direct experience of love again. That's the whole objective of this work.
That is so good, Michael. Thank you. I did a worksheet a few weeks ago on, and I came up with, my fear was of being annihilated, and I didn't get where that came from. Oh. And you just told me, it's like I just obliterated, annihilated were words that I used, and it was like, where did this come from?
Well, that's exactly what your professor that you're talking about, I would offer. I just about guarantee that's exactly what your professor was going through.
Yeah, it does take it a step deeper in terms of my experience of his energy. Absolutely. I mean, rage was just covered thinly over. This is a very thin veneer. I just wouldn't want to be in a dark alley and say the wrong thing to him.
One of the quotes in the front of my book is the quote from Emerson that says, "Most men live lives of quiet desperation." Mm-hmm. This is the root of the desperation.
Mm-hmm.
This is the root of the self that isn't. And it's time for us to reclaim a human life. It's time for us to go back to the direct experience of who we are and this insanity of a non-human life, to be finished with it, to be done with it.
Powerful stuff. Whew.
Fun process. And
great.
Hanging out with somebody in the middle of that transition back to being, pretty intense. Not many people want to. One of one of the most common drugs in the culture, aside from hostility, is busyness. Well, I'm going to keep myself so busy and so overwhelmed, I don't have time to touch into that level of pain. But the only way you reclaim a human life is to go back to. Otherwise, the replicant mind makes copies of, well, what is it to be loving? Well, you do this, and you do this, and you do this, and you do this. But notice when the stress is up and the chips are down, none of that works. What one goes to is the default of the carbon-based memory. And the default of the carbon-based memory is that deep pain and personal rage. And the willingness to take the time, instead of drugging ourselves with busyness, I haven't got time to do that, to actually step apart. Yeshua says, come apart from the world a while, go into the closet and close the door. You've got to take some time to allow yourself to deepen your healing process to the point where you will experience that moment at which you gave up being. And it will be the most intense experience of your life. And then you come out the other side functioning as a human being, instead of functioning out of hostility and fear.
So, Michael, before you run out of time, there's a question in the chat room about somebody who's dealing with a medical challenge, a melanoma of the foot, has 2 weeks before they have to do something medical about it, and they're looking for some input.
My highest thought would be, the first thing to do would be to Google, and I'm sure you wouldn't have to have the spelling correct. I don't have it in front of me, Brzezinski movie. There's a natural health site that has it on. You can watch it free. If I were in that posture, that would be the first thing I'd do, is I'd look for a fellow physician named Brzezinski who's in Texas. That movie lays out the whole process of what happens in the insane world. And so that would be my first order of business.
I actually have a link to it if you go to our website at whyagain.com under the health issues. Click on it. It's the first thing that's on that page.
I'd start there. That's going to give you some awesome information and some awesome input. And, Jeanie, you've got a couple of questions, a couple of callers on the line?
Yeah, that was one that Tim just read. And then there was another that sent me a private message, and she wants to know how to forgive someone who has done something tremendously offensive to her. I mean, it's really a bad issue, and how to forgive them. And so I sent her to the link to download the worksheet, and then also to listen to the sample worksheet, which is the one we walked through with Lynn, and listen to how you walked her through the forgiveness worksheet, and that would explain it. And then to, if she'll give us a call back then after she has done that with a specific question, but then we also have someone waiting on the line.
Okay, well, before you bring the person on the line, my first thought would be, please never forgive that person. That's a big mistake. Don't ever forgive that person, because you can't. Forgiveness has nothing to do with what this culture teaches as forgiveness. It has nothing to do with letting them off the hook. Forgiveness has not a thing to do with them. Forgiveness is how you go inside yourself and remove the trauma and pain that you're in, that your mind tells you, your replicant mind tells you, is about that person. So it's about taking responsibility for the part of you that holds that trauma and removing that trauma from your structure. Then, once you've forgiven, you'll come back to a mind of love, and in that mind of love, you'll have the opportunity to intelligently hold that person accountable for their behavior, if there's something to hold them accountable for, and you'll step out of the disease process. So that would be my most important input. Forgiveness has nothing to do with letting somebody else off the hook, because your physiology can produce some form of pain or trauma. Your physiology can only produce some form of pain or trauma if you have pain or trauma in your physiology. Forgiveness is how to dismantle it, how to take it apart, how to get rid of it. First order of business. And as Jeanie said, she gave you all the instructions for accessing that information. And Lynn's worksheet last week was absolutely awesome. It's on the website. And you can give it a listen, and you can just walk right through the whole process, step by step. Jeanie, you've got a caller?
Yes, and we're down to 4 minutes, but area code 619, you are on the air.
Hello, how you doing?
We are well. How are you?
Fine, thank you. You say something about return to the time that laughed, but if you never thought you had love in your life, how can you return to there?
Well, if you go and hold a newborn child, well, let me say this differently. Love is not something you have in your life. It's not something you get in your life. It's not something that comes from somewhere else. Love, I would offer, is the stuff you're made of. It is the fabric of your human life. We are taught very early in our lives, and most people give up their human lives by the age of 4. So it's long before we have memories of that. So by removing, forgiving what does not belong in your structure, what you will find is you will come back to the direct experience of your human life, and then you'll know exactly what the experience of love is, because it's what you're made out of. It's the stuff, literally, that you're made of. And the forgiveness process is about getting back to that. You know, I don't know if you're on the show a few minutes ago. I was talking about the woman who was in the intensive here. We're in the middle of a Laws of Living intensive, and she was in a fit of rage over what somebody had done. And when she was able to stop, get out of the blame, and get back to doing her work and forgiving her rage, within a minute and a half or so, she was smiling, grinning, had tingling all over her body, and said, I'm just in happiness. Nothing in her world had changed. The person who was the challenge was sitting right there in front of her, still sitting there, but all of a sudden she's got a big grin on her face and she's in happiness. She's touched back into her human life. When we approach the dramas and traumas in our world and in our lives, out of a human life, everything shifts. Everything looks different.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start doing this.
Delighted.
Thank you.
Okay. Blessings.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Tim, you have anything to share in that regard?
Oh, am I still on?
Oh, go ahead. Yes, you're still here. Come on in.
Oh, no. I was somewhere else. Thanks.
Okay. Cool.
Thanks.
So we're down to 90 seconds, which means we've got about 60 or 70 seconds left. Any questions from anyone? Anything else in the chat room, sweetie?
No.
No?
I don't have anything else.
Well, okay. Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here. We're getting close to completion time. If you're interested in taking your work to the next level, September the 16th through the 24th, we just scheduled another intensive here at Heartland called Laws of Living. We'll be doing that September 16th, 24th, residential intensive. We're going to be in Chicago on the 21st, the week of the 21st. That flyer will be on our website soon. Download the book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? Download that sample worksheet. It's under download worksheets, and listen to it. It'll tell you exactly how to do forgiveness. And we're just honored, blessed, and delighted that you're here with us. And we support you.
Thank you for listening to MindShifters Radio with the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce, and his wife, Jeanie, who present the internal Aramaic process of forgiveness. Michael and Jeanie are here every Monday through Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Earth Angels Radio. For more on Michael and Jeanie, please visit www.whyagain.com. That's www.whyagain.com.